so we can stand up for the American people who are overwhelmingly opposed to Donald Trump's reckless war of choice.
Thank you. What's your message to TSA workers who are going without paychecks, people who are suffering in these long lines preparing to travel, who don't care about the finger pointing, who don't care about the politics, they just want Congress to get to some solution? What do you say to them? Why can't this be figured out?
We should be able to get this done today. All Speaker Johnson needs to do is bring the legislation to the floor that will pay TSA agents and reopen the parts of the Department of Homeland Security that have nothing to do with ICE and have nothing to do with Trump's extreme and violent mass deportation machine. That's all that needs to happen. And yet, House Republicans and Senate Republicans have consistently rejected paying TSA agents. Why? It's because they don't support getting ICE under control. This is their policy. It's Trump's policy. It's Stephen Miller's policy to use taxpayer dollars to brutalize or kill American citizens, as we've seen with the cold-blooded killings of Renee Nicole Good and Alex Preddy. And the American people want that to stop. And if Republicans are unwilling to deal with that issue, they shouldn't be holding TSA agents hostage. They shouldn't be holding the American people hostage. But Republicans are intentionally creating chaos in airports all across America. It needs to end. Republicans control the House, the Senate, and the presidency. This could end today. But Republicans don't want it to.
But at what point?
Good morning. So the administration says they're going to request $200 billion for the war in Iran. I know many Democrats oppose the war, but if Democrats were to oppose this request, does that create a problem leaving troops under hostilities in the lurch in the middle of this conflict?
It's our understanding right now that there are no troops on the ground. And in fact, the American people would reject Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth and Republicans putting our troops on the ground in harm's way in the Middle East. In fact, what Donald Trump promised as candidate Trump is that he was not going to get America into a reckless war of choice in the Middle East. But as President Trump, that's exactly what he's done. And so it's our responsibility right now to end this reckless war of choice, to end the fact that billions of dollars have already been spent, perhaps up to $2 billion a day to drop bombs in the Middle East. But these same Republicans here ripped Medicaid away from millions of people, including children and seniors. They've stolen food from the mouths of hungry veterans by enacting a $186 billion cut to SNAP, and then at the same period of time, gave a $75 billion slush fund to ICE. That's their priority. They gave massive tax breaks to their billionaire donors. That's the Republican priority. And now they're dropping bombs in the Middle East in a reckless war of choice, spending billions of dollars. Here's what we should be doing. We should repeal the Medicaid cuts. We should extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits. We should refund the money that Donald Trump stole from the American people through his unconstitutional and unlawful tariffs as declared by the Supreme Court. That's what we should be doing if we're talking about the expenditure of billions of dollars of money. Make life better for everyday Americans.
What if the GOP asks for offsets?
We're not even in a position to have this conversation right now because the GOP, Republicans, are way off base as it relates to their priorities. And as I just mentioned, let's focus on bringing down housing costs, bringing down health care costs, bringing down grocery bills, bringing down child care costs, bringing down the price of gasoline, which is through the roof right now, almost $1 above where it had been the day before the war. Why? Because of Trump's reckless economic policies and the fact that House Republicans continue to bury their heads in the sand with their cult-like behavior acting like nothing more than reckless rubber stamps for Donald Trump's extreme policy. Let's start there before we have a conversation potentially about $200 billion more for this administration that has shown zero interest in spending a dime to actually improve the quality of life for the American people. And so I think it's clear where we are right now, as you've indicated, as it relates to this reckless war of choice and where the priorities should be. For Democrats, we believe the priorities should be, let's spend taxpayer dollars to actually make life more affordable for the American people, because it's become far too expensive as a result of Donald Trump and his failed Republican policies.
Thank you. I just want to go back to the War Powers resolution that you said Democrats will bring up in short order. Will that be identical to the last Iran War Powers resolution? And could you just give us any details about that process there?
Well, I'm not going to get out ahead of the sponsors of that War Powers resolution, but it will be different in nature to some degree, because we're now approximately 3 weeks into the war, and we've got a lot more information that can be presented to the American people as it relates to the concerns that they, of course, have had from the very beginning about Donald Trump's reckless war of choice, where there's no plan, no strategy, no objective. They clearly didn't anticipate what was going to happen in the Straits of Hormuz. Republicans clearly did not anticipate the fact that more than a dozen countries would be drawn into this conflict in the Middle East. Regime change hasn't taken place, which was one of the stated goals. And now the administration apparently is threatening to send ground troops in to Iran, which we know will be a disaster. We always are going to support our brave and heroic men and women in uniform, but we have a responsibility to make sure that public policymakers within this administration aren't recklessly sending our troops into harm's way. And so we look forward to a robust debate about whether to be in or out of this war. And House Democrats, as you've seen, are strongly opposed to this reckless war of choice.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. You mentioned that Congress and the Trump administration should be focused on making life better for the American people. You mentioned the high cost of housing as a priority that lawmakers should be focused on. Last week, the Senate passed what they call a comprehensive bill that would remove red tape and increase the supply of housing, thus lowering costs. In their argument, there are some House Republicans who are opposed to that bill, who are saying that they would like to go to conference with the Senate. That would prolong the process of lowering the cost of housing. Where do you stand on how Congress should be addressing the high cost of housing? Do you think that Congress should, the House should pass the Senate bill? How do you reconcile where we are with housing, and what's your message to the American people who are saying we need relief when it comes to rent, when it comes to mortgage, and there's a bill that's ready to be passed that's just languishing in the House?
Well, there's a lot that needs to be done in the area of housing. We're going to need to build millions of additional units over the next few years that the American people could afford. Millions of additional homes and houses and apartments. Now, the bipartisan bill that left the House is different than the bipartisan bill that just passed the Senate. And I believe that the two need to be reconciled. And the conference committee approach is the established vehicle for that to happen. I haven't had any conversations with Mike Johnson about what his intentions are. But clearly, there were provisions that were bipartisan in nature, championed by House Democrats in the bill that left our chamber, that didn't make it into the final version of the bill that left the Senate. And so I'm going to continue to support the efforts of Maxine Waters and House Democrats to get some of those provisions back into any final legislative product before it makes it to the president's desk.
Thanks, Mr. Leader. The next deadline for a reauthorization is next month. Of course, that's FISA. Speaker Johnson has said that he's going to try and pass a clean extension. Have House Democrats had a discussion on where they are on that? Is that something that you all would likely support?
We haven't had a caucus-wide discussion on it. Of course, The top Democrat on the Intel Committee, Jim Himes, has articulated one position. Jamie Raskin and Judiciary Committee Democrats, and I'm a former Judiciary Committee Democrat, have articulated a different position. And what you can expect is that every single Democrat will oppose the rule. And then we'll see where we go from there. It's clear that FISA reforms are necessary. Some improvements were made under the prior administration, but we're dealing with a very different dynamic in terms of the national security folks at the helm with respect to Donald Trump. In fact, these folks haven't even explained what the imminent threats were relative to Donald Trump's decision to strike Iran and get us involved in this reckless war of choice that's costing billions of dollars a day in taxpayer money. They haven't presented any evidence that there was an imminent threat. Even their officials who are testifying on the House side today and testified in the Senate yesterday. So there's a lot of questions that the Trump national security apparatus are going to have to answer, in our view, before there's a decision to move forward with a straightforward extension of 702.
House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries there as he was speaking yesterday on several topics to reporters on Iran as well as DHS funding. As you're taking a live look there out of Atlanta this morning, as we do know, the DHS shutdown impacting those TSA lines. We've been seeing them wrap down around the block here. In a matter of moments, we are going to be joined by Congressman Russell Fry as he's going to be speaking on all of this here in just 2 short minutes. Stay with us on Live Now from Fox. You're watching Live Now from Fox. Welcome back. I'm your host, Christy Matino. We continue to follow all the headlines there on Capitol Hill as you're taking a live look this morning. The top headline here, the Pentagon is seeking $200 billion in additional funds for the Iran war, a sizable amount that is being met with questions from Congress, which would need to approve any new money. The department sent the request to the White House. Asked about the figure at a press conference yesterday, Secretary Pete Hegseth did not directly confirm the amount, but hinted that number could change change. He said, quote, "It takes money to kill bad guys." President Trump has not yet sent a request for the Senate and House of Representatives to approve that amount. Now, once again, this would need to be approved by Congress, and it's unclear whether such spending would have political support. Administration officials telling lawmakers that the first 6 days of the Iran war had cost more than $11 billion. Now, President Trump mentioned the administration is asking for the money for other reasons beyond Iran, saying the emergency spending would be a, quote, "very small price to pay to ensure the nation's military stays in top shape." Now, also on Capitol Hill, we are following the DHS shutdown, and this is just some of the footage that we have here of some of those TSA lines. This is creating travel chaos in areas of the country, with some airports now closing security checkpoints due to callouts by Transportation Security Administration officers, raising concerns about threat levels. Now, we're learning that so far 366 TSA officers have quit during the shutdown, which is the third affecting TSA workers since the fall. Growing financial strain makes it harder for them to afford basics like gas or childcare while continuing to report for work. That's according to the American Federation of Government Employees, the union that represents most airport security screeners. Wait times at security lines continue to climb. TSA workers still going without a paycheck. A lot to discuss here. Bringing in Republican Representative Russell Fry now to the show. Thank you so much, Congressman, for taking the time to join us here on Live Now from Fox.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Well, I want to start with the Pentagon seeking up to $200 billion for the Iran war. Secretary Hegseth saying just yesterday that number could change. Do you believe the price tag justified right now? Is that something you would support?
Well, I haven't looked at this particular proposal. Obviously, the secretary confirmed yesterday that, that could change. And as these things are submitted by the administration to the Congress, it's something that we will seriously take a look at. What I think is important is obviously the readiness of the military. Certainly the secretary and the president have really centered national security around that, making sure our armed forces are ready, that they're capable, that they're lethal. These things are all components. And so on any measure, this or another one that would come before Congress, the question is for everybody is, does this help support readiness? Does this support our military? Does it give them the tools that they need to do their job effectively, to save lives, to protect American interests? These are all things that I would be looking at anything that is submitted to Congress. And so certainly you can count me in on being in line with the president and with the administration broadly on supporting the military, making sure that our troops have the tools that they need, and that we're on the cutting edge, that our warfighters have all the things that make them do their job effectively. So we would look at this like any other proposal before Congress with fair consideration, but certainly our goals being in the same in line with the administration.
Now, going off of that, as I said before I brought you in just these first 6 days, the war has cost more than $11 billion. Should taxpayers be concerned about how quickly this is adding up? What's your message to taxpayers?
Well, look, I mean, the purpose of the military is to protect American lives, protect American commerce, and American interests at home and overseas. This obviously is going to spend some money, cost some money to do, but obviously it's important. For decades, people have wondered why Iran was continuing these hostile acts to the United States. Presidents have said for decades that Iran should not have a nuclear weapon. And this president gave peace a lot of chance, gave them a ton of time to come to the negotiating table. But obviously, in the end, they chose not to do that, and they chose to continue on their path. So this thing was going to cost money. The question is it an effective use? So far, it looks like it was quite effective at destabilizing the military capabilities of the Iranian regime and allowing, hopefully, the Iranian people to take control of their own destiny.
And for those at home who may be unfamiliar, Congressman, with how this process is going to work, this request from the Pentagon, what does that process look like, and how quickly could we see this potentially approved?
Well, obviously, there's a traditional appropriations or budgeting process that Congress has gone through, and we've already done that. But on supplemental packages, things that are either augmented or taken away from existing expenditure of funds, sometimes you have an agency like the Department of War in this instance that would come forward and say, we need additional resources for X, Y, and Z. And so they would submit those things to Congress, the reasons why they would submit those, why we should consider funding or supporting these particular initiatives. And so when we receive that, that's when Congress can go about doing its work to see if that's something that we would do. We've done this in the past for any number of incursions or military operations, but we've also done it during times of peace when we needed to kind of change course a little bit and fund operations or fund things that our military should be equipped with.
I also wanted to ask you about this, Congressman, because we know President Trump says this is about keeping the military strong in a volatile world. Those were his words, and that the administration is asking for these funds for other reasons beyond Iran. Are you able to share with our viewers exactly what other threats or priorities this money could be used for? Is that something the administration has shared with lawmakers?
Well, I think it it obviously it depends. The thrust of this would, I would imagine, be the Iranian conflict and restocking our munitions. But there are any number of other things that are going on around the globe and priorities that the military should be engaged in. So you see this pretty routine in supplementals with both Republican and Democrat administrations. This is not a new concept. The military obviously is trying to, in real world, real time, respond to things that are going on across the globe. And so any supplemental would have the direct thing, which is Iran, but it would also include other priorities that the military is trying to do. It could be anything from housing to additional missiles or rockets or whatever. It really is, it really just depends on what the priorities of the administration are at the time when they submit this to Congress.
All right. I do want to transition now to the DHS shutdown. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy sharing this, saying the airport lines you're seeing now are child's play compared to what you will see next week if TSA misses another paycheck. Senator Schumer and the Dems DHS shutdown could cause a grinding halt for travelers. And really, Congressman, for Americans watching at home, we have been seeing, blame between Democrats and Republicans. I wanted to share this quick soundbite here from Senator Schumer. Before I ask you this next question, let's listen in.
We know that there are discussions about ICE and Border Patrol that we haven't resolved. But why hold TSA hostage? Why hold passengers at our airports who are waiting on long lines hostage? All the Republicans have to do is say yes, and those lines will be greatly reduced or go away.
All right, your message there to Democrats. And really, Congressman, what needs to happen here in order to bring this to a close?
Well, look, the Democrats are committing malpractice as far as governing is concerned. When you look at this, they negotiated months ago, both the House and the Senate, these appropriations bills. 11 of the 12 appropriations bills have passed and been signed into law. This is the last one. They negotiated this on the front end. It was only because it was politically expedient now for them to do so that they have reversed course. And so when I see Chuck Schumer saying these things on the Senate floor, I kind of laugh because the irony is just too rich. This is a guy who is backing up from a deal that they previously negotiated.
The information. So I think that communication is huge. There is both a lateral communication that goes on in embassies when we realize that things are getting a little bit heated, as Ambassador Bass said. There's also a vertical